Kia ora and welcome to Swim Chats, a podcast about swimming. I'm Gertrude Ederle, a writer, former journalist and swimmer from Wellington, Aotearoa, New Zealand. For each episode, I talk to a different guest from our swim community. Please hit the follow button so you don't miss an episode. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with a friend or two. You can also leave a 5-star rating, which helps other people discover Swim Chats. And finally, to support the podcast and help me to continue running it, you can become a swim buddy on Patreon for $5 a month. To find out more, visit patreon.com/swimchats. There's a link in the episode show notes. Today, I am excited to be once again joined by ultramarathon swimmer and friend of the podcast, John Hancock. John,
hey, Shona, how are you?
Welcome back.
Third time.
Third time. I was thinking you've achieved the triple crown of this podcast.
I
don't have a medal, but so first of all, we talked about Sir Bernard Freyberg, the wartime Anzac hero, and I'll link to these episodes in the show notes so people can go back if they haven't heard them. And then you came back a second time and we did a whole swim history episode about Leander, Beowulf, Lord Byron, and then randomly Roger Deakin, just because I wanted to talk about Roger Deakin. And then today we're going to talk about another famous swim hero called Captain Matthew Webb. And the reason we're talking about him this year specifically is because it's the 150th anniversary of his swim across the English Channel. And he was the first person to swim unassisted across the Channel, which was an incredible achievement at the time and still is. But at that time, nobody really believed it could be done, I don't think. Yeah, so I thought, first of all, we'll talk about his swim specifically, and then maybe you and I can go back in time and talk about his early life and how he came to swim across the Channel, and then all the events that followed from that amazing day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so as I said, it's the 150th anniversary, so the year was 1875, and it was August the 24th, his big swim. Now, this was actually his second attempt. He had attempted the swim 2 weeks earlier, but had to stop due to rough conditions. So he got back in the water on August the 24th. His successful swim was from Dover to Calais, and it took 21 hours and 40 minutes, so almost a day, and he was 27 years old. Now, I should mention here that his crossing was the first unassisted crossing, which makes it the first official swim across the Channel. But earlier the same year, there was a Captain Paul Boyton who also made it from one side to the other, but he was wearing a rubber inflatable survival suit, which he had designed himself. And he lay on his back with a paddle. So I think most of us, even though that was a remarkable achievement for the time, most of us would not really call that swimming. And so, John, I know you're going to come back to us later in the episode and tell us more about the equally colourful Captain Paul Boyton. But yeah, so returning to Captain Webb, his successful swim across the Channel involved a hearty breakfast. Sorry, my dog just did a big snore. I don't know if you heard that. My dog is not interested in this story, but we are. That's amazing. He enjoyed a hearty breakfast of bacon and eggs, washed down with some wine. John, just quickly, as an ultramarathon swimmer who has swum across the Cook Strait and Lake Taupo, did you enjoy a similar breakfast before
bacon and eggs washed down with wine?
Yeah.
Sadly not. Sadly not. I don't think I talked about it when I was interviewed by you, Shona, but the sort of process that Phil Rush takes you on if you haven't done things like Cook Strait before is he forces you to swim across Lake Taupo the year beforehand, because it's a much easier swim, but it's a really long way, so it's a good way of finding out whether you can do the training and if you can stay in your head for that long. And The lovely thing about Lake Taupo is it's very warm, so you can stop and have sandwiches, and frankly, you probably could have bacon and eggs while you were going. And about 2/3 of the way through the swim across Lake Taupo, Phil fired up the barbecue on the boat that was next to us, and so there was bacon and sausages and everything. And I stopped for a feed after half an hour and said, "Oh, that smells pretty good." So I got a bacon sandwich halfway across Lake Taupo.
And that's quite a British delicacy, isn't it? A bacon
Absolutely.
pasty. Yeah, perfect.
But Cook Strait is a much more serious proposition, so we weren't mucking around with things like that there. That was
No
all
bacon
very,
sandwiches that
very
day.
technical. And certainly no wine. The wine's
No
after the
wine,
swim.
yeah. I'm not a professional swimmer. Well, whatever a professional swimmer is, I'm not. But I imagine alcohol and swimming, definitely not a good mix.
Oh, I don't know, actually, Shona. I've, because I've had a lot of years with all the triathletes who've been great friends and everything, but they definitely take it a lot more seriously than most of the open water swimmers, who are far more bibulous and happy to have a few glasses of wine.
Maybe after, maybe not immediately before. Also, Captain Matthew Webb swam his English Channel swim breaststroke. Interesting. I suppose it was before what's known as the Australian crawl or the front crawl took off.
And somebody told me that sometimes they did a stroke called Old English breaststroke, which is particularly bizarre because you do it upside down. So you do it on your back, and so do the sort of frog arms and frog legs, but you can breathe more easily, and of course you can do that for hours. And I think that was actually how he did quite a lot of the swim, rather than what we think of as breaststroke today.
Right.
Old English breaststroke is a great thing to do at the end of a swim session, I also think. It's a nice way of opening your shoulders up.
Yes.
So,
I must give that a go.
top tip.
And he was 2/3 of the way across, apparently, when the tide shifted, which seems to be a common occurrence in some of these long swims. And then he spent the next 5 hours trying not to be pushed backwards by the water. So all in all, he swam 40 miles or 64 kilometres, a remarkable distance, particularly in 1875. There is a recording of him being stung by a lion's mane jelly, which I found interesting, partly because we also get those in Wellington Harbour. And he was given brandy for the pain. So once again, alcohol to the rescue. And we do know that on the day he wore a red silk swimsuit, which
sounds quite stylish. I think we should bring that back.
We could. I don't know about the chafing element, but yeah. And one thing that took me down the rabbit hole of research a little bit is I read he was covered in porpoise oil. And I was thinking, okay, what's that? I mean, obviously it's self-explanatory, but why porpoise oil specifically? And so porpoise oil was quite popular lubricant of the time. It was mostly used for small mechanical devices like timepieces and fine instruments, but also for open water marathon swimming, apparently. So I found this old advertisement, which looks sort of turn of the century, for porpoise jaw oil, which was sold in bottles for lubricating your timepiece, whether it was a clock or and it says the incomparable lubricity of the dolphin oils has led to over 100 years use, so even at this point, as superb lubricants for timepieces, micrometers, fine instruments, electrical contacts, and all delicate mechanisms. So that it was the porpoise oil, which I wouldn't recommend for moral, ethical reasons, but it obviously assisted Captain Webb with his successful swim. So we should acknowledge the sacrifice of the...
But the other thing about it, Shona, is it's not just porpoise oil, it's porpoise jaw oil. So it was made from the jaw and head of porpoises and beluga whales.
Beluga whales, that's right.
So there's some, I mean, as well as it being a little bit non-PC these days, but still very unclear about exactly whereabouts this stuff was extracted and what process they went through. Maybe Swim Chat's listener will write in and tell us about the art of refining porpoise jaw oil from
Yes,
the
if
head.
anyone knows about the history of porpoise jaw oil, please write in or leave a comment below this episode. So during the swim, apart from his bacon and eggs breakfast, we know that Captain Webb drank beef tea, cod liver oil, sounds delicious, coffee, mugs of ale, and some extra brandy en route. Yeah, and so despite the kind of mixed diet he enjoyed, there were no other successful crossings for 30 years, which that's quite remarkable, isn't
It
it?
is amazing, and you think about how it's changed today. Like when I crewed for Rebecca, which was probably one of the busiest days of the summer, but there were 6 boats. There were 2 individuals, and there were 4 teams. So in the same day, there would have been whatever 20 odd people trying to get across the English Channel, and that's just one day in summer. So it's really really become quite a big event these days.
It has, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and later in the episode, I've dug up some stats on the
Mm.
English Channel swims and its history, so we'll talk more about that. But for now, let's go a bit more into Captain Webb's backstory to discover who he was and how he came to be this champion swimmer. So he was born in 1848, son of a doctor, one of 14 children, and grew up near a river, so was a confident swimmer. And that was rare for the time. It wasn't like the era where lots of
No.
children were having swimming lessons. We do know he saved the life of a younger brother at some point, so his confidence in the water was apparent. He worked on ships from the age of 12, joined the Navy, um, and then we also know that he performed a heroic act while serving as an officer on a ship called the Russia. There was a sailor swept overboard, and this was in the stormy mid-Atlantic, very cold water. And Captain Webb didn't hesitate. He dove into the cold water. The ship was travelling at a high speed as well. John, this is your research. The ship was travelling at 14 and a half knots. I'm not really a knot person. Do you?
That's quick, right?
That's
That's
quick, yeah.
20 kilometers an hour. That's certainly a lot faster than you can swim.
Yeah, right. And we know that he spent 37 minutes in the water, which, at the freezing temperature and the rough conditions, that would have been incredibly difficult. He ended up having to be rescued. Sadly, he wasn't able to rescue the sailor that he was attempting to save. But this act of heroism earned him a medal. It was the first ever Stanhope Gold Medal from the Royal Humane Society. And so even before his English Channel swim, he was known in the press as being a heroic captain.
And Shona, there are real echoes of Sir Bernard Freyberg here, aren't there? This sort of boy's own annual, almost insane heroism, throwing himself into situations that were so dangerous. He had to be rescued, even though he didn't manage to rescue the guy who he jumped in the water to try and save, and presumably put someone else's life in danger. There's probably a
point.
follow-up episode we're going to have to do, which is the the unpopular side of Captain Webb and
Yes.
all the difficulties that he dragged other people into.
That's such a good point, actually. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. So, yeah, after his English Channel swim, which apparently was so remarkable, it was almost like somebody stepping on the moon, because people hadn't believed it could be done. He was a world celebrity. There were parades given in his honor. He was showered with money. And because it was the age of the showman and people enjoyed public spectacles, he continued sort of performing in the water, I guess you would say. So he travelled the world, he competed, he spent apparently 60 hours in a whale tank at an aquarium in Westminster. And then in the US, he travelled there and spent another 5 days in another tank. So he was really trying to sort of maintain this public interest in him, but it was also a financial thing because this became his living. It was how he earned money. It's through his fame and sort of trying to maintain that fame. But unfortunately, it became a bit of a double-edged sword. He had to sort of become increasingly daring to retain the interest in him and to keep getting money. So, for example, he did a 32-kilometre swim in some outdoor baths in the UK, but his health began failing in the early 1880s. He developed tuberculosis, and he was in financial strife. So, by this point, he decided to increase the level of daring even further. And in 1883, he decided to swim across the Whirlpool Rapids at the bottom of Niagara Falls. I have not been to Niagara Falls. Have you, John?
No.
No, I haven't. But I've certainly seen videos of these Whirlpool Rapids, and they do not look anywhere close to somewhere that people should be swimming in. And people said so to him at the time. They said, "Do not do it. It's a suicide mission." But he was determined. He felt confident that he could be the first person to do it. Unfortunately, he was wrong. And so at the age of 35, he perished in these waters. Apparently the water speed alone was 100 kilometres an hour. He perished pretty quickly, and left behind a wife and 2 children by this stage.
And no money. So
No money.
it's another sort of chapter in the sort of slightly foolhardy story of our boys' own heroes in swimming of this era.
It was definitely a step too far, and he was only 35 at this point as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, still very young. So a sad ending for our famous Captain Webb, but at least he's still acknowledged and celebrated today as the first person to swim across the English Channel. So he's still known, definitely in swimming circles, I would say. And in Dover, there's a memorial on the waterfront, which was unveiled in the early 1900s, which shows Captain Webb looking out across the channel towards France. I thought that was a nice tribute. And on his memorial, there's an epitaph that says, "Nothing great is easy." I guess it's true. Do you agree with that, John? Nothing great is easy?
I loved your in the notes you wrote, it perfectly captures his attitude towards his life of crazy daring. Which it's almost like if something's easy, it's not even worth doing. I think that's maybe a little bit too extreme.
Crazy daring would have been a good epitaph. We're crazy daring. Yeah, it does lead me to wonder, because obviously the English Channel, being the first person to do that, is an amazing achievement and a wonderful thing to be remembered by. But the Niagara Falls attempt, obviously, that was too far. So, by his story, are we inspired, or are we sort of made more cautious? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, he's a sort of Steve Gurney character, isn't he? If in Steve Gurney's autobiography, the Coast to Coast guy, he tells a story about how he was kayaking in Island Bay and just decided that he was going to kayak across Cook Strait and set off at sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon and got benighted and, the whole thing just became really quite an incident. I mean, frankly, it's a miracle that no one else was killed when Webb did his swim across the Whirlpool Rapids below Niagara Falls, because certainly his track record does seem to be one of dragging other people into situations of crazy daring, not just doing it himself.
I got the impression that nobody jumped in to rescue him that time. He was left to his own devices. Yeah.
So that's him, and it, like you say, you sort of go down these rabbit holes of research and discover all these interesting little tributaries and everything. But Shona, you suggested that probably we should acknowledge probably his biggest legacy, which is swimming the English Channel now. We've had quite a lot of conversations about swimming Cook Strait because obviously that's our local thing. And surely that is Webb's great achievement, was proving that this could be done. And it's now, without question, the most famous open water swim in the world. It's iconic, as I was saying earlier on. The number of people who do it now is enormous, and the number of skippers who support people across the English Channel now is amazing.
It's classic, isn't it? Yeah, and it's one of the Ocean 7 swims, isn't it?
That's right. So we've talked about the Ocean 7 on the podcast before, but just so that sort of people who maybe haven't listened to every episode, I'm sure there's only a couple
Probably
of them
not.
out there. But the Ocean 7 is a sort of ad hoc collection of 7 great crossings, I suppose, that can be swum, that a famous swimmer from, I think he's from Los Angeles, sort of wrote an article about and then sort of created a movement. And the 7 crossings of the English Channel, Cook Strait, which is one of the reasons we have so many people coming to New Zealand now, because a lot of people are trying to tick off the Ocean 7. Then the Straits of Gibraltar, between Africa and Europe, which is quite short. That's probably the easiest of them. Between 2 of the islands in Japan and between 2 of the islands in Hawaii. And then the other 2 swims, one of them is called the North Channel. So this is between Ireland and Scotland. So that's probably the most difficult of them. It's extremely cold and full of monsters, and several of your interviewees have talked about that swim. And then the final one is actually from a place called Catalina Island to Long Beach in California, which is a very odd swim, until I realized that the guy who invented the Ocean 7 lives near Long Beach. So it's almost like it's his local swim. And I think that's maybe the reason that made the list. Who knows? But
Right.
anyway.
Yeah, that would make sense. Are
'Cause it-
you tempted to
not remotely, Shona. Thank you very much.
so we're not breaking any news here that you've signed the other 6.
I think when you talked to me on the podcast, you were asking about the New Zealand Triple Crown, which is swimming Lake Taupo, swimming the Cook Strait, and then swimming the Fovo Strait between Stewart Island and Bluff in the far south. And that's extremely cold, like the North Channel. But interestingly, like Catalina Island, Stewart Island is actually where the great white sharks in New Zealand all breed. So this really doesn't sound like a very attractive proposition to me. But anyway, all the people who've done it.
Yeah, and a couple of episodes I spoke to a shark scientist.
Yeah. He
Okay.
was great, wasn't he?
So actively looking for sharks, yeah. So, whole other perspective.
But we thought it might be quite interesting just to talk about the English Channel itself. And I was thinking also to contrast it with the Cook Strait, as you seem to have quite a strong New Zealand sort of franchise with your podcast. So it's further than the Cook Strait. So it's 21 miles, which is almost exactly the same number of kilometers that Cook Strait is in a straight line. And nearly nobody swims it in a straight line because, like Cook Strait, it's very tidal. It isn't quite as sort of mercurial as the Cook Strait swim. So the Cook Strait swim is particularly technical because there's a different current on the shores of both islands. So you get this extreme swing. But when you look at the trace of swimmers in the English Channel, they also follow this big S shape if they're swimming at a normal speed. And the corners in the S are where the tide turns. So you were talking about how our friend Captain Webb spent 5 hours swimming to stay in the same place, and that's very, very common. When the tide turns, you just swim happily and go absolutely nowhere. And of course, you've got no idea because you're in the middle of the sea. So as far as you're concerned, you're making progress. But There's a famous Phil Rush story, actually. We'll get to Phil in a second and his English Channel legacy, where he was doing a multiple English Channel crossing. And he said he was swimming away and they got to Dover Harbour and he could see the lights in Dover Harbour. And then he was swimming around and he had a bit of a feed and kept swimming. And then he had another feed and thought, hang on, those are the lights of Dover Harbour. And his skipper had decided that because of the tides turning, they'd be much better just to swim in circles in the harbour, wait for the tide to turn and then go out into the English Channel rather than go out and then have to deal with much more technical conditions. Yeah. But I suppose the really big difference between the English Channel and the Cook Strait is that I think it's probably true to say the English Channel is the busiest shipping channel in the world. So it's absolutely staggering. When you go there, I think your stat, Shona, was there's 600 commercial tankers and 200 ferries every single day cross the English Channel or go up and down the English Channel. It's so busy that the English Channel actually it has a northbound and a southbound highway, and there's a 2-kilometer wide exclusion zone between the two of them. So when you're swimming or when you're following a swimmer, once you get into the first channel, you can hear the lifeguard talking to all the boats saying, "We have swimmers in the channel, be alert." But it's entirely up to the skipper to try and work out how to dodge these things because they're enormous and they can't change direction suddenly. So you've got this tiny little swimmer and a tiny little boat and these absolutely colossal container ships sort of chugging their way along. And speaking to people who've done it, they say you can hear the engines, this very sort of low grinding rotation of the propeller, and it sounds like it's right next to you. And of course, when you're swimming through these shipping lanes, the boats are actually quite close because you're moving really slowly and they're moving a lot faster than you. So there comes a point when they sort of move across your path and you are pretty close to them. So, yeah, that's not the same as Cook Strait, where if you're lucky, you might see the ferry in the distance once in your entire trip and maybe you'll see somebody sailing or somebody fishing or something, but it's pretty quiet.
Yeah, much less traffic. Wow.
Much
I
less
can't.
traffic.
Yeah, I'm such a zigzag swimmer. I can't imagine staying in my lane either. The skipper would be saying, "No, to the left, to the left."
But timing wise, it's not unlike Cook Strait because the currents are friendlier in the English Channel. You're not fighting currents on both islands, so the average crossing time is about 13.5 hours. That's maybe a little bit more than the average crossing time for Cook Strait, but not much. And you've got a great stat. 2/3 of the channel swimmers are male. What are you trying to say? Is that like, these stupid men with...
It was just one of the facts and figures. No, I don't know. I should have compared it with the Cook Strait, actually. But yeah, I imagine over the past few decades there have been an increasing number of females. Whereas, we know for sure that back in the day, in the early 20th century, females were not encouraged to swim across the English Channel.
Although, the English Channel has a famous legacy for female open water swimming.
They do now, yeah.
And well, recently we've had a revival of this because there's this really quite good Disney movie called A Young Woman and the Sea, which is the story of this American woman, Gertrude Ederle, who was the first woman to swim across the English Channel. And it's a Disney movie. It's not totally accurate and it's quite feel-good and everything, but, there's a lot of girl power in there and sticking it to the patriarchal establishment.
Yes, she thwarted at almost every turn.
Absolutely.
Amazing. She achieved that, and that was in 1926, so that was one of the stats, wasn't it?
That's right. But the most incredible stat was in 2019, and this is one of the most extraordinary swims in human history, where another American marathon swimmer, Sarah Thomas, completed the first and only 4-way crossing of the English Channel. And this is absolutely staggering. I remember when it happened, that the whole open water swimming world stopped to watch this incredible achievement. I mean, it may never happen again. That's the other thing, because you need such a long window of good weather, and you need somebody who's in condition to be able to do it. And you need a skipper who's capable of supporting there. But staggering. So it took her 54 hours to swim 4 ways. And there's a fantastic trace, and you can see these S's overlaying each other and then going in the opposite direction. When she finished, she scrambled out onto the beach, and there's this sort of protocol that you're not allowed to touch the swimmer until they're sort of safely out of the water and everything. And and everyone was sort of buzzing around, sort of wanting to help, but not quite knowing what to do. And she said she wanted some M&Ms. So there's this video of her having finished this incredible swim, where there's a huge bag of M&Ms that she's tucking into. And I can't believe that M&Ms didn't sponsor her, because this is like the best video footage ever. Turn her into some absolute celebrity.
Yeah, what more of an endorsement could you want? It's an M company.
But I mean, little personal anecdote about Sarah Thomas's swim. So, I mean, another great female swimmer from Wellington who's swum the English Channel recently is Rebecca Hollingsworth, who swam it 2 years ago, and I was on her support boat. And I was very excited because it's a pretty cool thing to do. But I was also very excited because her pilot, Eddie Spearing, was the pilot for Sarah Thomas, and he's piloted an awful lot of really sort of famous marathon swimmers. And I was really looking forward to meeting him, because he's very well known. And it's very interesting. Rebecca said he was such a skillful, but he had a very big boat, but she said it was in exactly the right place all the time, incredibly skillful. And obviously Sarah Thomas had to swim and stay awake for 54 hours to do her swim. He had to stay awake for 54 hours as well. He had other people, but at the end of the day, the pilot has the lead responsibility. Unbelievable. So very, very excited to meet this man. He's just a regular guy from Dover. He's a regular guy from Dover who's into boats, and he got into supporting swimmers because he's from Dover. Absolutely no background in swimming, even though he now knows as much about marathon swimming as almost anyone. His eye for what she was doing was extraordinary. Actually, when she started swimming, he said, "Oh, this is going to be quite quick," and she'd only been going for about 20 minutes. So, a privilege to meet somebody like him, and that. Yeah, but I mean, other amazing women who've been involved in the English Channel. The record number of crossings is also a woman. This is a British woman this time, Alison Streeter, who's done 43 successful crossings of the English Channel. Some of them as solos, but some doubles and one triple. Yeah, and that's amazing, right? 43.
I couldn't believe some of these statistics. I feel like my brain can't even process that much long distance swimming. It's remarkable.
There's another famous marathon swimmer who's an Australian woman, Chloe McArdle, and she's had quite a similar history with the English Channel, where she's gone out every single summer and, just sort of knocks out the odd crossing or double crossing or whatever.
For some people, it seems almost like a recreational swim.
Yeah. But we've no episode of Swim Chats would be complete without talking about Phil Rush, and that's the absolute benchmark. So Alison Streeter has done one triple crossing. She's one of a very, very small number of swimmers to manage to do that. And as I said, the Sarah Thomas crossing is particularly incredible to do 4 ways, because you need such a big weather window. You've talked to Phil Rush, so we've heard the story. And anyone who hasn't listened to that episode, it's brilliant. I mean, his stories about what he did are incredible. But Phil had one day in 1987 where he broke the 1, 2, and 3-way speed records for crossing the English Channel in the same swim. Now, somebody has broken his one-way record in the 40-odd years since this happened, but the 2- and 3-way records still stand, and I think this is one of the most extraordinary records in sporting history. Because it's the English Channel, right? This is the most popular marathon swim in the world. All the greats have tried to break these records, and none of them have managed. And my ultimate stat about Phil's 3-way crossing was that when Sarah Thomas was doing her 4-way crossing, Phil had already finished his 3rd crossing at the time that Sarah Thomas finished her 2nd crossing. That's how fast he was swimming.
Wow.
Absolutely, absolutely extraordinary, and a privilege. And as I'm sure the listeners are getting the measure, one of the reasons that open water swimming is in such great heart in Wellington is because Phil lives here.
Yeah.
And he's created this movement now,
I
of
feel so
which,
proud. I feel so proud to live in the same city as Phil
yeah,
Rudd, even though I've
yeah.
had absolutely nothing to do with any of his swims. Just
Um,
a slight association with him. Yeah.
that's
And when we talked about his triple crossing, he mentioned that he was disappointed he hadn't continued that day. He
done the
felt he
fourth.
could have, yeah.
Yeah, that's
He says,
right.
Mm.
Yeah, does it? He often says it's one of his few regrets in life that because he actually thinks he could have done it,
Mm.
um, and uh, and it sounds like the weather would have held for I mean, in the interview he talked about how long he had to wait. It was several years to get a weather window that was long enough. So every single summer he'd go to the UK, he'd live in London and go to Dover all the time, waiting for this weather window to try and have a crack. And then when the day arrived, well, it still did pretty amazing.
That's true, right? Yeah.
Um, but more stats. So unlike Cook Strait, the best time of the year to try and swim the English Channel is in late August. That's not a great time of the year to try and swim Cook Strait because it's extremely cold. But it's actually exactly the same logic. It's late summer, and the reason for that is that the sea takes quite a long time to warm up. So early summer swims, even if it's lovely and sunny and quite warm, the water's usually still quite cold. And actually, by the end of summer, even if the day is quite cold, the water stays warm for quite a long time. So it's probably the most
Mm.
reliable time. So in Cook Strait again, it's February is probably the best time to go. Um,
And so
but
the water temperature at that time would be like, it wouldn't be warm exactly. It might be sort of mid to late teens for
yes,
both.
that's right, sort of 15, 16, something like that, which is pretty similar to Cook Strait. Sometimes it can get warmer than that. And then your obsession with jellyfish, Shona. So you've already talked to us about how our friend Captain Webb was stung by a lion's mane jellyfish, which also
Was
frequents
treated with
the
brandy. Yep.
yes,
Numb the
but
pain.
we have lion's mane jellyfish here, and moon jellyfish, which are exactly the same. But the really big difference here, we talked a little bit about this. I think when you talked to me, I said I was the 147th person to swim Cook Strait. There've been more than 2,000 successful solo swims of the English Channel, and
Yeah.
it is like Piccadilly Circus on a busy day in the middle of summer. There are so many people and boats, and they all know each other, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's like a party. Unbelievable. Yeah, and the other thing I think I mentioned, that the day that Rebecca swam it, there were 2 solos, there were 4 relays, and I think this relay project is something that's becoming, just a fun thing to do with your mates, even if you're not super tough. I mean, Phil does occasionally support relays across Cook Strait, and Lake Taupo and other places, but it's obviously quite a production line in the UK for the English Channel. And it's quite manageable because, you only need to swim for an hour or so. And, so long as you've got other people in the team who can rotate and you do your training, it's a great thing to do. Actually, it's a great way of introducing people to, there we go, Shona, that's our project for you. Relay across,
I'll do the
Cook
first
Strait.
10 meters. I'll get everybody started. Actually,
Um,
on that note, I thought it might be a good idea to acknowledge the people who attempt the
mhm.
swim. and don't make it, which, I know would be disappointing. But giving it a go there's something sort of heroic in that as well, as long as you do it safely. I know that some people have died in their attempts to swim the
Yeah.
channel, particularly people who just sort of go off and do it by themselves with no preparation. That does happen. But yeah, also people who do multiple attempts before they succeed, which I guess technically
Mm,
Captain Webb was one, because
mm.
he did one attempt 2 weeks before he was successful, but some people do it, a dozen times, right? And then they're finally successful.
Year after year after year. Yeah, that's right. I couldn't find out what percentage of people have succeeded,
Mm.
or what percentage of swims are successful. Because I remember Phil told me that over history, only 50% of the Cook Strait attempts have been successful, but that the success rate is much higher now because we've got a much better understanding of what risks you need to manage, how to manage particularly the cold,
Yeah.
how to manage the currents and the tides, and the like. Again, which is largely due to the experience that he's um, sort of brought to it, and this sort of very high success rate that we have at the moment. And I suppose also, going back to the Ocean 7 thing, the caliber of the international swimmers who come to swim Cook Strait is very, very high. I mean, often these people have already done English Channel and all these other crazily hard um, point-to-point swims.
One question I had, which I'm not expecting you to answer. It's more of a sort of rhetorical question, just that I thought of. But you know how we talk about an unassisted swim, so that's you've got your bathing suit, your goggles, and your swim cap, and you're not supposed to have anything else. But with the huge advances in technology we're having, I wonder what will count as unassisted in the future.
Hmm.
So, for example, you can wear goggles now that sort of give you more data about your swim. Does that still count as an unassisted swim? I mean, I'm assuming you can't have things like that in a marathon.
Techno goggles, I'd be amazed. I mean, it's almost like the rules were set by the English Channel Swimming Association in about sort of 1950.
Mm.
And it's a miracle that you don't have to do it in knitted woolen trunks, or what did we decide that Webb did
Red
it in?
red
He had
sock.
it's red
Red
silk swimsuits. Um, I'm sure you're going to put this wonderful photo that you found of
Yes,
Captain Webb looking very smart.
yes. Very
Yes, that.
heroic, hands on hips. Yep, that will be the episode. Yep.
Which is exactly the same as the photo that you found of Sir Bernard Freiberg. There's another
Yes,
one
that's
which,
right.
again,
Staring at the camera with
yeah, and a huge moustache.
yeah, gotta have the moustache. Well,
Very,
Phil Rush had a moustache in those
he
days,
did, he
didn't he?
did.
So
He
maybe
had a
that's the secret to it.
Magnum PI moustache. Very, very appropriate for Movember, really. We should
Oh, yeah, good
give,
point. Yeah,
give it
November.
um,
Now,
a
earlier in the episode, I mentioned that the first assisted swim was Captain Paul Boyton, who had designed this fancy rubber inflatable suit. And I know that you went off and did a little more research into Captain Boyton. Would you like to tell us what you've learned?
This is brilliant. I mean, he belongs in the Bernard Freiberg, Matthew Webb canon of boys' own adventurers. So Boyton, his nickname was the Fearless Frogman, and he was an American showman, really. So you talked about Webb's life and career, that after swimming the English Channel, he sort of got into sort of show off swims and did these crazy sort of ultra long duration and increasingly dangerous swims as a way of as a professional, and collected money for people. And Boyton was already into that gig when he tried to swim the English Channel, so he just thought this is a cool spectacle. But he had actually been a sailor. For the Union Navy. I think the Union Navy is like a predecessor of the US Navy in the sort of late 19th century. So he'd already sort of created a bit of a repertoire of aquatic stunts that he was sort of pulling off, of which his English Channel crossing was the the sort of uh, just another example. So unlike Webb, he crossed the English Channel from France to England. So he started at the Point Grinet, which is technically it is the closest point to England, in, as you say, in 1875, just before Webb's swim. But he got a friend to invent this inflatable rubber survival suit, so he wasn't even in the water. He was sort of like, it was almost like he was wearing an inflatable rubber boat, and so sort of up above it. But because he was up above the water, the only way he could propel himself was with a paddle, because of course his hand would have been too high to be able to swim normally. But even better, when he was lying on his back, he hoisted a sail and just got the wind to blow him across. So I think it would be fair to say it was an assisted swim.
I wish we had video of this.
I absolutely wish we did. And it's a bit of a shame that, he doesn't have quite the same sort of reputation that Webb does, because the purists say, well, it wasn't really a swim. But God, I mean, his catalogue of boy's own adventures. So he swam down rivers. That was one of his big things. So he swam down the Danube, the Rhine, the Mississippi, and the Missouri in his rubber suit, this amazing rubber suit. But he towed a little canoe behind him, which had all his supplies in it, because obviously going down these rivers took days. And the place I was researching this said sometimes, as well as his supplies, there were reporters in the canoe. So he was towing a reporter with him to take footage about this for his promotion. So, it's really appropriate that we should sort of finish with Boyton, because you started off by saying, he was the first guy to cross the English Channel, although it wasn't a swim. But obviously after Webb did successfully swim the Channel, the two of them became great rivals, because they were both in the crazy swimming adventures business, and they took on competitions against each other. And you were talking earlier on, Shona, about how ill-advised some of the things that Webb tried to do were, but you've got this other guy egging him on to do these other incredible things. I think the rivalry came to a head in 1879, where they had all these sort of exhibition swims, and they pitted the two of them against each other in what they called the Championship of the World, the most insane adventure swimmer, which Captain Webb actually won, prevailing for the honour of true swimmers rather than inflatable suit swimmers. But it's a nice way to sort of draw the story to an end. But as you say, you put me under quite a lot of pressure to do this. It's like, John, we need to do our swimming history one about Captain Webb now, because 2025 is the 150th anniversary of Webb's English Channel crossing, and it's November, so we need to get on with it, and we need to publish the podcast. So we've just about made it,
We've made it in time for Christmas. Yeah. Thank you so much, John.
But the other thing I was very excited about with this podcast, because Swim Chats is turning into quite a phenomenon. And you all hear the little introduction where Shona talks about her background as a former journalist and author. And Shona's career is taking off, actually, because she's participating in a swimming authors evening at Newtown Library later in the month. So anyone who lives in Wellington, it's in late November, isn't it, Shona? Where you and several of the other people who've been on the podcast are going to be talking about the books they've written, and maybe we can have an episode where we get you to talk about some of the stuff you've written. But I think this is the first time that you've ever actually done the talking. I've been trying to get somebody to interview you for a long time, and I received a lot of pushback, but that was so great. It's just the beginning of a whole new stream within the the Swim Chats canon. So Shona, thank you for sort of agreeing to be the focus of today's episode rather than just the interviewer.
The interviewer. Oh, well, yeah.
Been great.
Fun to do the research on these interesting characters from our past.
And there are so many. I'm sure we're going to find some other ones.
We'll never run out. I've got a whole list of them. But yeah, Captain Webb was a good one. And yeah, John, for coming on the podcast for the third time this year. I now owe you a multitude of coffees and cheese scones when we finally see each other in person. So thank you for not being too traumatized by the first 2 times you came on Wellington.
It's the only swimming record I'm ever going to hold, I think, is having done more Swim Chats episodes than anyone else.
It's a very honourable record. I'll have to fashion some kind of medal or inflatable survival suit. Thanks for listening to this episode of Swim Chats. Please remember to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, you can leave a 5-star rating and review, which helps other people find it too. Enjoy the water, and we'll see you next time.